Good afternoon. It's April 21st, 2024. It is Good Shepherd Sunday, or the fourth Sunday of the Easter season. And today we're invited to reflect upon the shepherds, the pastors, and the bishops and the priests who lead, guide, are responsible for the governance, the sanctification, and the teaching of the people of God. But to do so, sometimes we need to understand what the hierarchy of the church really looks like. In the first reading today, St. Peter reminds us that Jesus is the cornerstone on which everything is built. The downside of it is we don't understand cornerstones anymore. You walk around any city, anywhere in Canada, and you'll see a cornerstone. It's on the side, beside the door, whatever, and it's all symbolic. It's all ceremonial. It's not real. The cornerstone is actually the first stone that's laid, that if it's not square, if it's not level, then your building is not going to be square or level, and it'll fall down. Jesus is the cornerstone. He's what everything in the church is built upon. And when we start off, we have the 12 apostles. And of course, the key to that is St. Peter, because he's the first pope. And the other apostles are like the bishops, like they are today. Holy Father, Pope Francis, is the Bishop of Rome. And so we have our bishops. And then after the bishops, we have our priests. And after the priests, we have our deacons. And woven in and amongst all of them are our theologians, the magisterium, the teaching office of the church, all of that kinds that comes together. But it always comes back to a point. And that point is, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And so the cornerstone is laid there, but now we have St. Peter. And now we have the bishops. And now we have the priests. And interwoven, like I said, are the theologians. Then you have your deacons. Then you have your religious, your consecrated, right? And eventually we make our way to the laity. But if we look at it carefully, one of the things is like it's a pyramid, an upside down triangle. And the point being the cornerstone, Jesus Christ. And when we look at the hierarchy of the church, one of the things that we have to understand is our accountability and our responsibility. The priests and bishops are entrusted with the governance of the church. They're entrusted with the sanctification of the people. They're responsible for the teaching of the people. But if they don't do their job well, the triangle reminds us of what happens. Because if you got a priest over in this corner and he's not being faithful and he's not teaching, then all of the people that are in his triangle, he could lead them astray and take them away from Christ. But we're supposed to direct it towards Christ. But in our church today, and throughout history, we have had a shortage of priests. We've had a shortage of religious. We've had a shortage of consecrated. And so what we wind up with is we begin this triangle, and then it juts in on us. And now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of people out there that are not being taken care of the way they should be taken care of. They're not being fed with the Eucharist. They're not being fed on the Word because the priests just aren't available. The deacons aren't available. The religious aren't available because people aren't listening. God hasn't stopped calling young men and young women to the priesthood and religious life. God continues to call them. Our problem is, are we listening? And are we getting the encouragement that we need to be able to respond to the call? In our society today, you hear often, well, I wouldn't want my child to be a priest. I wouldn't want my child to be a sister. I wouldn't want my... And how selfish is that? If God is calling them, then we should be encouraging them to go. But oftentimes what happens is we get the negatives. And the other part of it is we don't understand what it really takes to discern if we're called to that life. You see, it's kind of related to the rest of life, okay? Sometimes you have to date a number of people to find the right person that you're called to be married to. Well, same thing in religious life in the priesthood. You've got to do the discernment. And sometimes you need to go away so that you can discern. You get all of the noise in your life out of the way so you can actually listen to the Word of God in your life. Be able to immerse yourself in the Scriptures and say, is this what God is really calling me to? And as a diocesan priest, well, we're kind of eclectic. We're a little bit of Franciscan, we're a little Jesuit, we're a little this, we're a little that. We're an eclectic person. But if you're a religious, well, if your charism is not Franciscan, you're not going to fit with the Franciscans. If your charism is not Carmelite, you're not going to fit with the Carmelites. If your charism is not Jesuit, you're not going to fit with the Jesuits. You have to have the charism that fits with that religious order. And sometimes people who are called to that religious life may have to go to a number of places to discern, is this where I fit? Is this where God is calling me to? And that's when I relate it to, it's like, well, I dated this girl, and I dated that girl, and I dated this girl, and sometimes it's like, how do I find my way in the midst of this? For young women in the religious life, it's the same thing. And I know a young woman who, she went to 3 different religious orders before she finally found that 4th order, and for 20 years she's been with them because it was the right place. The charism fit. But those first 3 orders that she went and visited with, lived with for a period of time, the charism wasn't her. There were similarities, right? The prayer life, the going to Mass, the holy hour before Christ, and sometimes 3 or 4 hours, all was great, but something was missing and something wasn't right. And she knew she wasn't in the right place. But she never stopped looking. She never stopped seeing, because somewhere deep inside her, she knew. And this is the part where it's sort of like, do we listen to the deepest desire of our heart? I have a very, very dear friend who constantly harped on me about that. Kevin, what is the deepest desire of your heart? And the deepest desire of my heart was to serve Christ. Wasn't sure what that looked like, had to discern that part of it, and then had to say yes to the priesthood. Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will. What does that service look like? Well, that's always been in his hands, not mine. But it's being able to say yes, and then stay committed to your yes. And some days that's difficult. But then again, I talk to people who are married, and they tell me, married life is not easy, Kevin. Some days it's very difficult, right? Single life. I know people who have lived their entire life single, and it's not easy either. Doesn't matter what our vocation is, whether it's single, whether it's married, whether it's religious, whether it's the priesthood. There will be struggles. There will be difficulties. But if it is the deepest desire of your heart, if it is that brings your heart alive, then all will be well, and all will move forward. Today we celebrate Good Shepherd Sunday. We're invited to pray for our priests. We're invited to pray for seminarians. We're invited to pray for the religious, the men and women. We're also invited to encourage, to support, to assist, to watch over. There are many, many young people out there called to the priesthood and religious life. There are many young women specifically called to that holiness of life. But if you and I don't support them, and you and I don't encourage them, how are they supposed to find their way? And how are they going to feel comfortable in it? You see, priesthood and religious life has always been an opportunity for all of us, an opportunity to draw closer to God in a certain, uniquely different way. Many are called to it. The downside of it is we have to listen, we have to discern, and we have to respond. It is the 21st of April, 2024. It's Good Shepherd Sunday. May God continue to watch over you, bless you, and if you know somebody that you think might be called, encourage them, support them, help them along the way.